What happens when you take $200,000 and spread it across the 5 best Fidelity index funds? John's asking himself that right now. And the answer comes down to one thing: how he builds it. Build it one way, and John gets paid more than $6,000 a month for life. Build it another way, same $200,000, same 5 funds, and the account grows into almost $13 million. In this video, John takes that $200,000 and spreads it across 5 Fidelity index funds built to cover everything from America's biggest companies to the fastest growing corners of the world. Then he builds 2 completely different portfolios out of those same 5. One tilted to pay him, one tilted to grow. And by the end, you'll see how one version pays John over $6,200 a month for life, and the other turns that same $200,000 into a $12.8 million account. So here's where John starts. He's gone through just about every index fund that Fidelity offers, and he keeps landing on the same 5. There's a reason for that. Every portfolio worth building has a few jobs that need to be filled. Number 1, something to anchor it. 2, something to grow it fast. 3, something reaching for the companies that aren't big yet. 4, something paying real income. And 5, something betting on the parts of the world that everyone's written off. 5 jobs, and these 5 funds handle them. Quick thing before we get into them, in case you're newer to this: an index fund is just a basket of stocks that follows a set rule. Nobody's sitting there picking winners and losers. The fund owns whatever's in the index that it tracks, and that's it. That's why these things cost almost nothing to own, and why they tend to work so well if you just leave them alone over the long term. All right, the 5 funds. John starts with the one that holds everything together, the boring one, FXAIX, the Fidelity 500 Index Fund. This is the anchor. It tracks the S&P 500, which is basically the 500 biggest companies in America all in one fund. When you hear someone say, "Well, the market was up today," this is basically what they mean. The names inside are exactly who you'd guess: Nvidia, Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Meta, and it leans heavy on tech, more than a third of the whole fund. John picks this one first and doesn't think twice about it. There's nothing to debate here. If you're building anything at all, this is the floor you build it on. One quick note before we get to the numbers, because we're about to use the word dividend a lot. A dividend is just a slice of a company's profits that get paid back to you for owning the stock, usually every 3 months. Own more shares, get a bigger check. That's the whole idea. On the numbers, FXAIX runs a 1.06% dividend yield, a 6.84% dividend growth rate, and a 13.54% annual share price appreciation. And that appreciation number is the steady engine the rest of the portfolio gets measured against. So the core gives John all 500 of those companies at their normal size, every one of them treated the same. But a handful of those names have been pulling most of the weight lately. And the next fund John picks is built to lean right into them. FNCMX, the Fidelity Nasdaq Composite Index Fund. If FXAIX is the anchor, this one is the engine. It tracks the Nasdaq Composite, which is around 3,000 companies, and it's packed with tech. One quick bit of context first, because this one trips people up. The Nasdaq isn't a company, and it isn't really a fund either. It's a stock exchange, a place where stocks get bought and sold. It just happens to be where most of the big tech names list themselves, so any fund tracking it ends up tilted hard toward tech. Now look at what's actually inside. Some top names you just saw in FXAIX: Nvidia, Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Alphabet. But the weights are a completely different story. In this fund, Nvidia alone is more than 11%. The top 10 holdings make up nearly 59% of the entire thing. So you're not really getting 3,000 companies spread out evenly, you're getting a heavy bet on a few tech giant names with a long tail trailing behind them. John adds this one as his growth play, and the reason is basically one number. FNCMX comes in at a 0.47% dividend yield, a 6.91% dividend growth rate, and a 17.95% annual share price appreciation. That 17.95% is the highest of any fund in this entire video. That's the upside. Just one thing to know, remember that tech-heavy concentration cuts both ways. When big tech is running, the fund flies. When big tech takes a hit, this is the one that feels it first and feels it the hardest. FXAIX and FNCMX have one thing in common though. They're both built out of giants, companies that already made it, which leaves a pretty obvious gap. Where's the growth that hasn't happened yet? FSSNX, the Fidelity Small Cap Index Fund. And to introduce it, let me just read you a few of its top holdings. Bloom Energy, Coeur Mining, Fabrinet. If you've never heard of a single one of those, good. That's kind of the whole point of this fund. It tracks the Russell 2000, which is about 2,000 small American companies, the ones that are too small to make it into the S&P 500. And unlike FNCMX, nothing in here is a big bet. The top 10 holdings add up to under 6% of the fund. No single company really moves the needle. It's 2,000 little shots on goal, spread thin. The idea behind it is simple. Every giant inside FXAIX was a tiny company once as well. This is John's bet that a few of these names turn into the giants of the next 30 years. Run the numbers on FSSNX and you get a 0.89% dividend yield, a 7.44% dividend growth rate, and a 9.6% annual share price appreciation. Now, I've got to be straight with you about this one because the numbers don't tell the story you'd expect. Small caps are supposed to be the high-risk, high-reward slice, the rocket fuel. But look at that 9.6% appreciation. It's the lowest we've seen so far, lower than both big U.S. funds. Small companies have actually trailed the giants for years now. So why even hold this one at all? Well, not because the track record wins, because obviously it doesn't. John holds it because it's the one corner that the other four funds can't reach. The small stuff before it's big. That's not a sure thing, it's a bet, and he's making it on purpose. And that is the whole American side of the portfolio. The biggest companies, a concentrated bet on the best of them, and a flyer on the smallest ones. But here's the problem with stopping there. Every dollar is still riding on one single country, and no country leads forever. The US has had a brutal decade before, where it went nowhere for years, while the rest of the world kept moving. So putting a piece of your money outside America isn't betting against it. It's making sure your whole plan doesn't depend on one country winning every single decade. For this, John goes with FSPSX, the Fidelity International Index Fund. And this is the one that genuinely surprised him, because the highest paying fund of the five isn't an American fund at all. It's this one. FSPSX tracks something called the MSCI EAFE, which is a fancy way of saying developed countries outside of the US. Think Japan, the UK, Germany, Switzerland, Australia. Established economies, big, stable companies. The kind of names you sort of half recognize. Nestle, Roche, AstraZeneca, HSBC, plus ASML, a Dutch company most people have never even heard of that builds the only machines on Earth advanced enough to print a modern computer chip. They don't make the chips, they make the machine that makes them possible. FSPSX does two jobs in this portfolio. The first one is income, and we'll get to exactly how much in just a minute. The second is insurance. If America hits a rough patch, this is the part of the portfolio that doesn't go down with it because it isn't tied to the U.S. at all. Here's where FSPSX earns its spot. A 5.8% dividend yield, a 6.85% dividend growth rate, and a 7% annual share price appreciation. That dividend yield at 5.8% is more than triple the next highest fund in the lineup. But sit with those numbers for a second because they pull in two directions. FSPSX pays the most of any fund here, while it grows the account the slowest of any fund here. Developed International has lagged the U.S. for well over a decade. So you've got the best income and the weakest growth living inside the same fund. Hold that thought because it's the exact tension the back half of this video runs on. So, Developed International hands John the income and the stability. But those same developed economies are the slow-growing part of the world, which leaves one last piece, the part of the world that's still on its way up. FPADX, the Fidelity Emerging Markets Index Fund. And this one's a flat-out contradiction. It's been one of the worst-performing corners of the market for about 10 years running, and it has the fastest-growing dividend of all 5 funds in this portfolio. Both of those are true at the exact same time. Emerging markets just means the economies that are still growing into their full size. Not the US, not Europe, places like Taiwan, South Korea, China, India. About 80% of this fund sits in Asia, and it's top-heavy in a way that's worth seeing for yourself. Taiwan Semiconductor is the company that takes machines like ASML's and actually manufactures the chips. Most of the world's advanced chips come out of their factories, and it's more than 14% of the whole fund on its own. One company on one island carrying a 1/7 of everything in here. After that, it's Samsung, SK Hynix, Tencent, Alibaba, all of them giants, none of them American. It's worth noticing, actually, Nvidia anchored the American funds, ASML showed up over in Europe, and now Taiwan Semiconductor here in Asia. Chip makers are propping up every single corner of this portfolio on every continent. The whole modern market kind of runs on them now. John's reason for holding this one is the dividend growth. The numbers on FPADX land at a 1.91% dividend yield, an 11.01% dividend growth rate, and a 7.71% annual share price appreciation. That 11.01% dividend growth is the highest in the entire portfolio. So that's all 5. An anchor, an engine, a wild card, an income payer, and a long shot. 5 funds, 5 jobs, done. But here's the part most people get completely backwards. Picking good funds, that's the easy part. Anyone can do it. The decision that actually changes John's life is how much of each one he buys. Because these exact 5 funds can be built 2 completely different ways. Lean the weights in one direction, and this portfolio pays John every single month. Lean them the other way, and it grows into something close to twice the size. Same $200,000, same 5 funds. The weighting is the entire strategy. Next, I'll walk you through the dividend-tilted portfolio, the version that pays John $6,273 every single month for life. And in the end, you'll see how the growth-tilted version takes that same $200,000 and turns it into a $12.86 million portfolio. So let's build the first one, the version designed to pay him. This is the dividend-tilted portfolio. Here's how the $200,000 splits up. The biggest slice, 35%, goes to FSPSX, the International Fund. That's $70,000. It's the biggest piece because it's the one writing the checks. That 5.8% yield is the cash actually landing in John's account. Next, 20% into FPADX, the Emerging Markets Fund, $40,000. This is the long shot, but remember, it's also got the fastest growing dividend of the 5. In an income portfolio, that matters a lot. It's the piece that grows the paycheck over time. Then 20% into FXAIX, the S&P 500, another $40,000. That's the quality anchor, keeping the whole thing grounded in America's biggest companies. 15% goes to FNCMX, the growth engine, $30,000. Even in an income build, John wants some real growth in here so the account doesn't just stall out. And the last 10%, $20,000, goes into FSSNX, the small cap wildcard, the smallest slice because in a portfolio built to pay you, the long shots stay small. Now here's something that flips how this looks. Add up the American funds, FXAIX, FNCMX, and FSNX, and they come out to 45% of the portfolio. The 2 international funds are the other 55%. So this isn't John turning his back on America, it's him letting the higher paying side of the world take the lead while almost half the money stays home. Put those 5 weights together, and the dividend-tilted portfolio comes out to a 2.78% yield, a 7.75% dividend growth rate, and a 10.35% annual appreciation. So that's the build. Here's what it's projected to actually do. After the first year, projections show the $200,000 growing to $226,272. Nothing wild yet. Give it 10 years, and it's projected to reach $668,839. By year 20, projections have it at $2,125,315, and by year 30, the dividend-tilted portfolio is projected to reach $6,492,396. By year 30, this portfolio is projected to pay John $75,282 a year in dividends. That works out to $6,273 a month, every month for the rest of his life. And here's what makes that different from just selling off stock to live on. He doesn't touch the account to get it. The $6,273 is the dividends being paid out on their own. The shares stay invested. The account stays whole and keeps right on growing. The money just shows up. Of the roughly $6.29 million this portfolio is projected to add on top of the original $200,000, about $5.45 million would come from share prices rising over time. The other $839,000 or so would come from dividends being reinvested along the way. That word reinvested is doing a lot of work, so quick explanation. Every time a dividend gets paid, instead of pocketing the cash, John uses it to automatically buy a few more shares. Those new shares then pay their own dividends, which buy more shares, which pay more dividends. Stretch that loop over 30 years, and it turns into a snowball. So that's the version built to pay John $6.49 million in the account and $6,273 landing every month without him selling a thing. But that's only one way to build it. And John knows there's another version of him watching this, a version that doesn't care about the monthly check, a version that just wants the biggest possible account at the end. So what happens when he takes those exact same 5 funds and weights them in the opposite direction? Same 5 funds, brand new weights, and they look almost nothing alike. Half the entire portfolio now, 50%, $100,000, goes to FNCMX, the growth engine. That 17.95% appreciation was the highest of the group, and this build leans on it as hard as it possibly can. 25% goes to FXAIX, the S&P 500, $50,000. Still the anchor, just a bigger one this time, adding more steady large cap growth. 10% goes into FSSNX, the small cap wildcard, $20,000. Same as before, the long shot for some extra upside. 10% goes into FPADX, emerging markets, another $20,000. The bet is still on the table, just sized small. And finally, FSPSX, the international fund that was the whole star of the income build, well, it drops all the way down to 5%, $10,000. At this weight, it isn't paying the bills anymore. It's just a little insurance against the U.S. having a bad stretch. Notice what happened to the two international funds. In the income build, they were 55% of everything. Here, they're only 15%. They basically swapped seats with the American growth names. This portfolio is now about 85% American, and almost all of it is built to grow, not to pay. When you average those five together, the growth-tilted portfolio runs at a 1.07% yield, a 7.35% dividend growth rate, and a 14.44% annual appreciation. That appreciation number is what's about to do almost all the work. So if the goal is the biggest possible number at the end, this is what that's projected to look like. After year one, it's projected at $231,022. By year 10, projections show the growth build reaching $825,205, already pulling ahead. By year 20, $3,285,871. The gap just keeps widening every decade faster than the one before. And by year 30, the growth-tilted portfolio is projected to reach $12,862,188, almost $13 million out of that same $200,000. And almost all of that is one single thing: share prices going up. Of the $12.66 million this portfolio is projected to add, about $12.47 million would come from appreciation alone. Only about $197,000 of it would come from dividends. That's close to 98% pure price growth and barely a sliver from income, which shows up exactly where you'd expect it to. By year 30, this portfolio is projected to pay John $14,244 a year. That's $1,187 a month. So, John's now got two portfolios in front of him, and the one that grew almost twice as big is the one that pays him almost nothing. That's the part that doesn't sit right with John at first. The income build ends at $6.49 million. Paying $6,273 a month. The growth build ends at $12.86 million, paying only $1,187 a month. On the dividends alone, the smaller account pays more than 5 times what the bigger one does. But hey, I know some of you are already running a different set of math in your head, because there's another way to pull income out of that big account, and it's called the 4% rule. Quick explanation: the 4% rule is the standard guideline for living off of your investments. The idea is you can pull out about 4% of your portfolio every year in retirement, and the account should last you. So let's apply it. 4% of that $12.86 million growth portfolio is $514,487 a year, which comes to $42,874 a month. That is a fantastic number. It's nearly 7 times the income portfolio's $6,273. So if your goal is the most spendable cash in retirement, the growth build, using the 4% rule, is genuinely hard to beat. That's a real valid way to do this. Now, 4% is just the starting point. If you want to play it safer, a lot of people pull 2 to 3% instead, so the money lasts even if they live to 100. On this account, 3% is still $32,155 a month. Sure, there will be some flex year to year, more in good markets, less after a bad one. Whatever number you'd actually use, you can run it on your own balance. The point is, the big account gives you that flexibility. So if the growth portfolio can pay that much more, why would anyone build the income version instead? Here's the one thing the 4% rule can't get around: selling. That $42,874 a month only exists if John sells off a chunk of his shares every single year. He's slowly drawing the account down to pay himself. Meanwhile, the income portfolio's $6,273 works differently. That's dividends being paid out while every share stays exactly where it is. The account doesn't shrink. In fact, it keeps growing. He never sells a thing. And that difference matters most the moment the market drops. Say it crashes the same year John retires. With the growth portfolio, he'd be selling shares at the bottom just to cover his bills, locking in those losses for good. There's a name for that risk. It's called sequence of returns risk, and it's one of the reasons people retire with huge accounts and still manage to run low. The dividend portfolio doesn't care what the market did this year. The checks just keep coming. So I know what you're asking. Which one actually wins? Both of them. That's the honest answer. The growth portfolio makes John richer, and it can hand him far more cash to live on as long as he's comfortable selling pieces of it and riding out the timing. The income portfolio pays less, but it never asks him to sell, and it never leans on good timing to work. One version is a bigger pile he draws down over time. The other is a check that shows up every month while the whole account just sits there, still growing. That right there is the real decision John's making. Does he want a bigger number that he has to slowly take apart, or a steady paycheck that leaves the entire thing standing? But that paycheck took $200,000 to build. What if you don't have $200,000? What if all you've got is $25 a week? Click the video on the screen to see how to earn $5,000 a month with only a $25 a week contribution.